Okay. John, we are so excited to have you here today as part of our Career Clues series. So we'd love to start with having you share a little bit about your career story.
Sure. Yeah, I actually graduated from Carlson as an undergrad and really thought I wanted sort of a career in banking, and specifically, I was working my way into wealth management. And after several years upon that path, I did come to the conclusion it simply wasn't fulfilling really what I was looking for in my
Mhm.
career. I was looking for something more strategic and also wanted the opportunity to lead people. And therefore, I did make my decision to come and pursue my MBA at Carlson again, and really utilize Carlson's resources to sort of
Mhm.
understand what a career looks like for me.
Mhm.
So really, it was trying to find that personal satisfaction in whatever I did next. And fortunately, through the help of Carlson and really
Yeah.
my career coach, you, Bridget,
Yeah.
and my amazing network of just MBA peers, that everyone I was able to sort of kind of connect with and grow my own personal network, I was able to get connected with post-consumer brands,
Mhm.
which has really offered me exactly what I was looking to do in terms of a strategic financial position.
Right. So can you tell us a bit about what your career journey has been at Post, like from a title perspective? And then what are kind of the major buckets of your work? If you were to segment your work into kind of percentages, like what that looks like.
Sure. Yeah, so I started at Post as a senior financial analyst,
Awesome.
specifically on brand strategy, supporting the adult brands. I then, after about a year, I was promoted to a manager, finance manager, supporting our advertising budget, some SG&A work, royalties. And I did that for about a year, which was a little more accounting based than maybe I was looking for. So then, after about a year, I actually was transitioned back to a finance manager over the brand strategy, again, overseeing the adult brands and then the multi-meal bag brands in our value segment, and then have had two or three reports coming directly into me. So one thing I would say, just in terms of the segments and buckets, this role is very different than how typical finance roles are perceived. It's less general and administrative, or even less accounting based in terms of the strategy role I'm in now. So at the forefront, it very much is the company strategy and really influencing that tangible product that a CPG company puts on shelf. Um, so in this vein, I'm responsible for overseeing the successful performance of my brands. Some of those duties include determining our pricing and promotional strategies, performing market analyses of in-market performance trends at sort of the key retailers, and then really assisting in modeling sort of new product commercialization, so our ideas for innovation and growth. And all of this is sort of leading into understanding that true financial impact to PCB and the implications of our decisions. Um, One thing too, Bridget, maybe this is going too far, but it's really important. I think I emphasize that financial success does not just mean bottom line profitability. It really is actively influencing sort of our brand and business strategy partners, whether it be cross-functional partners directly that we are working with, or even the stakeholders. But really need to deliver sort of that credible analyses in order to make that right decision for the company overall, and more importantly, what our consumers are looking for.
I love that. It's so helpful, especially to be hearing the different elements of your day of, the analyses and the strategy and influencing and pricing and market analyses. It truly is that there's that element of like the MBA generalist of needing
Yeah.
to know all the pieces to function well as part of the big puzzle. So could you, and I know it's a weird to ask, like, what's a typical day? Because there's not always a typical day, but kind of, helping our audience understand a little more about like what a day in the life of, a finance manager might look like.
Yeah, and that's one thing I do love about my job, is that every day is truly different in terms of the project or analysis you have to perform. And so I'll try to generalize it, but
Yeah.
I may very well start with examining sort of the market performance. Looking at the consumption trends related to our dollar or volume share, but also understanding what is competition doing in terms of how they may have changed strategies and how we may have to adjust as well. I may also start looking at implementing like a new promotion. really what is sort of our expected incremental lift to our sales based
Mhm.
on offering that sort of depth of discount. And really what is our return on investment ROI, or even that break even figure that, we have to achieve even as we offer that discount on the product. Another task that we do all the time is just creating those financial models to sort of capture what a business case might look like if we were to implement sort of that change to our portfolio mix. And, really models, they're not as black and white as they're sort of given to you in, the classroom. These are really us taking sort of data from scratch and, kind of using that experience or even the tools we've gained from our MBAs to really design something that helps us make those decisions.
Okay.
And then finally, I would just say, a lot of our job is, again, delivering sort of that presentable, tangible outcome in terms of the strategy or performance of the brand, and whether it be to the cross-functional partners or executive leadership. And really, again, measuring against the benchmarks such as our budget, our forecast, those expectations, and then explaining what factors drove the performance we're seeing.
Yeah.
So I know that's a lot, but that is, those are pieces that we touch each and every day,
Yeah.
depending on what we need to do.
And I love kind of hearing like the different, kind of being able to picture some of the different pieces of work. And I'm making the assumption that you're doing, some of these things are happening in meetings, or you're preparing for meetings, like preparing to bring models
Yep.
to the meetings. And so, but it also sounds like you stay pretty busy.
Very busy.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Good. Well, so our final question is, what do you look for in candidates? So for our audience, as they're thinking about like, well, could this be a viable and interesting career path for me? I know they're really curious to understand what would be some key skills or character traits or knowledge bases that would make them a competitive candidate.
Yeah. And really two skills come to mind, and it's exactly what I tell candidates up front in interviews is we are looking for candidates who are curious and also comfortable with ambiguity.
Mhm.
And I point out the curiosity piece, as I've sort of explained in these tasks, you really are responsible for going through and kind of just examining what it means for our business, the strategy that we're driving, or what the competition is doing in terms of how do we react or how do we be proactive for when this happens
Mm.
next time. And really that curiosity can drive you in a million different directions, but honing it back in to say, this is the impact or implications of the decision we make. And then the ambiguity part, I think it's really tough for some prospective candidates to come in because, again, certain models they're used to having a black and white. Here's what the model says. This is the answer, but that's just not how the real world
Mm.
acts. It really is. So the model tells you this. So what? Is it best for our business to maybe have worse margins because that is what the consumer is trending towards, or that's just what better is it better for our efficiencies. There's a whole bunch of different ways that, again, you're going to have to play in that gray area. So just being comfortable with the ambiguity and being comfortable taking a task and building sort of the answer that building the model or the analysis in order to find the answer that you need.
Yeah, and that's to me signals a strong need for critical thinking skills, right? Critical thinking,
Mhm.
comparing and contrasting, and being able to validate your decisions, and being able to lean on that curiosity as well and digging in. Would you say, you've mentioned like financial modeling, a little bit of accounting. Are there any special classes that you remember taking that you might recommend, or just, concepts that would make a candidate feel confident going into a role like this?
Yeah, great question. I did think just the general corporate finance course was really great. I know I mentioned this isn't your typical finance role in that sense, but just those principles can be applied to all aspects of business. The financial modeling course, of course, is a need be to be sort of in any finance role. But I would say also the pricing strategies course, I think it's actually a marketing pricing strategies.
Mhm.
I think really hones in on that point that no matter what you do as a business, it has to meet the consumer need.
Mhm.
And so, you can make any decision you want, but if your customer is not going to buy it, you're not going to get very far or be very successful. So, again, that's
Right.
why you have to make decisions that it's not always about that financial impact, but really what's best for the business or the customer.
Right. And that's something that you're working in teams and figuring that out together.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
I love that. Well, thank you so much, John, for sharing a little bit more about what it looks like to work in finance in a CPG company.
Yeah, my pleasure, Bridget. Thank you.
Great. Um,